We should never allow the government to decide what is acceptable speech and what is unacceptable speech. We should penalize behaviors, not opinions, and not speech. If you start trying to regulate speech, you start trying to regulate thoughts, you start trying to regulate beliefs rather than behaviors, there's no way that you're not going to abridge the constitutional rights of millions of Americans.
This is a video today, relating to artwork, specifically during the 1970s. When I first saw Star Wars in theaters, everybody knows that there were classic movie posters they came out with, and I have tried since seeing Star Wars to try collecting different artistic renditions of motion pictures that have been made specifically in the 70s. I think was the best time in history when they did classic illustrations. This is a shirt that I found at I think it was either Kohl's. I would say it was Kohl's, and anyway they had it on clearance, and it's the only size I could find in an extra large. And if you look at it, this looks just like the animation that they drew during the 70s. The detail is very, very massively recreated. Whoever did the illustration for Star Wars, because this is showing the X-Wings at the Death Star, is classic animation. This is a classic illustration. I also have collected a couple of illustrations for King Kong, because King Kong was done exactly the same illustration-wise how they show it in this. And if anybody's wondering how does this thing glow like this, I'm using a black light so that you can see a little more of the details. I hope it comes out on this camera. There's another reason for why I chose to also do this subject about illustrations. I have searched since I saw this particular photograph, and I've never found it. The Omni magazine used to publish a lot of UFO illustrations, and these were like artistic recreations of what an artist might have thought that a UFO would look like. And I've never found it again since I saw it originally around 1977 or 1978. It showed a UFO, and it had 3 different tripod landing gear on the ground, and the shape of this thing looked like an almond. You know, it wasn't like the Kecksburg, Pennsylvania UFO, because that looked like an acorn. But very distinctly, this thing showed 3 monkeys kind of standing around it looking at it. And the illustration also showed, I believe, either one alien or it could have shown maybe a human being or something. But I do remember there were 3 monkeys looking at this thing. It was on a grass field, and it had butterflies kind of in the illustration around it. And it also had a tree. And since seeing that, everywhere I've searched in the years since, I've never found it again. Anybody that maybe has seen this illustration of a UFO, my recollection is that it was kind of a goldish bronze color, but it was definitely shaped like either a walnut or an almond. You know, it was round, and then it came to a point, and then it came to a basically like it was shaped at a point, and then it went out, and then it went around like this, and then a point, and then it was down, and then the tripods came off, one in the front, and then 2 on the sides. But it was very, very distinctive. It had a grass field that it was sitting on, and after that, I never found it again. It was beautiful artwork. It was nothing like this though. This is somebody's illustration. They did the image very defined, very detailed. This is something you probably might have seen in Starlog magazine, because the artwork was so well recreated. There was so much unique details. They knew this is something kids would go crazy for because of all the details that they illustrated in the picture. But in my search for other artworks similar to this, I have not found nothing in stores since where you show the kind of detail up close of the illustrator, whoever he was that did this. It just blows your mind how really artistic and how much a visionary these artists were in the 70s to recreate something that really captures the scene of a film, and then to do it in an illustrated format where they don't have to take like a snapshot from one of the cells of the motion picture. That shows artistry in the individual who did it, because they take one shot from the film and then they visualize what they want it to look like, and then they draw it in as much fine detail as you see in this picture. And it has the X-Wings. It also had the other type of spaceships that the rebel forces were using at that time. And it's basically, this whole shot is recreated also on the back, so you get to either have it, if somebody doesn't see your front of your shirt, they can see it in the back of your shirt. So double chance to see the artistry of the t-shirt. And this is actually an authorized Star Wars merchandise item. Now somebody else probably has other t-shirts similar to this, but when I saw it, I just couldn't believe how much of the detail was done in this t-shirt, like they did in the composites that they used in the King Kong movie. Another thing that I have collected beyond just photographs or magazines is they did lunch boxes. King Kong was made as a lunchbox after they released it in 1978 through Paramount Pictures. It starred Jeff Bridges, Jessica Lange, several other people were in it too, but what was key was the artwork. They had King Kong holding, and I'll probably show it behind me, he's holding a blimp, a dirigible in one hand. He's got his hand on either a helicopter in his other hand, or it was an airplane. And the detail is exactly like how they illustrated the Star Wars t-shirt. Very, very it was very detailed, and the artist had to recreate it based on what he envisioned it would have looked like, and that's what caught my eye. Then they did another one on the lunchbox where he was tearing through the large wooden walls that they had erected around the village where the tribesmen lived, and they did an illustration of that, and that's as detailed as the one of him standing on the World Trade Centers, by the way. they illustrated King Kong standing on top of the World Trade Centers, and that was right after they finished actually building the World Trade Centers. It actually opened around 1978, and they illustrated King Kong for that, and plus they did all the the finale climactic scenes where he was killed after falling. They did that in the World Trade Center's complex around World Trade Center 7, 1 and 2, and all the other complex buildings around it. And it's just it's amazing how people today, they depend so much on digital recreations. They use CGI. Those really are not technically visionary artists because they depend on the computer to create it for them. This was not done with a computer. This is actually somebody hand drawing every single line, every color. Now they're going to say, nah, somebody digitized it and then they created the shirt. Well, that's true maybe, but initially all of the stuff that was done for Star Wars in the early 70s, all of that was done with hand line art. And then they had to colorize all the individual colors on it. Then they recreated it for posters and everything else you can imagine. But at that time, they only had silk screen abilities to do t-shirts. They could not print like this, where everything is just kind of like, it's digitally put into the computer and then they're able to print it in this kind of detail in a recreation. Now very likely this is one of those early 70s line art drawings that were done for the original 77 release of the movie. But you just can't see classic artwork today because they lack imagination. What they do with computers is basically let it do all the work, and then they very rarely have to do anything in compositing pictures because all of it's done totally digitally through the computer instead of it being them hand drawing them. Now there'll be skeptics who will say, oh no, that's not true, they still do some line art stuff like this. If they do, folks, it is nothing compared to how the original artists had to do these kinds of illustrations. It was very time consuming. You look at the first movie of Star Wars, you can see that they had to do basically mapping. And this is basically, they took a piece of glass and they had to composite the background, meaning they had to paint it by hand. And then they would take and they would composite that into the shot so it looked like it was behind them. Like when Obi-Wan Kenobi is standing there deactivating one of the force fields that held the ship inside the Death Star, all that was done painted. They painted all that by hand. And that's the brilliance of original science fiction movies. They had to do it all by hand, visually through their minds, instead of them using a computer to composite all of it. And that's why so much of the original stuff is gone. That's why it's so classic and so well sought after as far as collectibles, because they know they'll never do stuff like this again today because they don't have to. Now everything is done for them through the computer itself, and that's where they lose a lot of their imagination, because now they entirely depend on that computer to do it for them. I do videos on my channel a lot of times, and I'm really surprised how few people watch some of the videos I've done, because it takes a long time to composite some shots that I've done, because I'm doing basically what the artists had to do, like Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, and originally they had to composite everything, but they had to use paint, they had to use light, they had to use whatever they had at that time. And I don't have some massive memory computer that I can depend on to do a lot of the stuff you see. I'm using a laptop computer. I'm using only about 8 gig of memory, and it takes a long time, some of these things. I know you're going to say, oh man, you pop these things up in 3 days. Well, that's because I enjoy it. I don't do this for money. That's another thing. Most people who are on YouTube and they have like 300,000 subscribers, it isn't because their stuff's any better, it's because in most cases, these people have gained their popularity by not saying stuff that the millennials don't like listening to or hearing. And when you speak of socialism and communism, or you speak of other subject matters that they think are just not something they want to hear, they tune you out, they block you. But I thought I should say that in this video, because nothing you see is done simply by me having some sort of a stockpile of archive images here and there. Sometimes I do, and I've done them over the past 20 years, since the 90s. I've been able to scan some things. But I've also lost computers, and a lot of the images are lost because of the fact they crashed or got a virus on them or whatever. And then I have to go back and I have to recreate them again, or I have to redo them again. My openings that I've done for CKO Tele-Radio channel, 21st Century Television, a lot of people tell me, oh, you're cheating, you're using somebody else's work. I use their work only because they offer people the chance to have it or to use it. And then I kind of try to recomposite it and make it better, because then I'm able to say, this is my idea of what I thought it should look like or what it was. So the people who are hypocritical or slap me down and say things like, you're stealing other people's things or whatever, I just laugh. I'm like, if they don't want people to be able to use these things, they wouldn't put in fine print at the top of their title, royal free, use it anytime you want to, that sort of thing. They don't think about that. They don't care, because they just want to try to come up with some lie or another of what you're trying to do in whatever video you make. But I don't have a problem with however few views I get, because folks, it isn't about whether or not other people just are ecstatically happy with my work. It's only because of the fact that I enjoy what I'm doing. And Steven Spielberg, believe this or not, this is what Steven Spielberg said when he did Jaws and then he did Close Encounters. He said, all of my works from the 70s until the late 90s, he said it was all for himself. He said, I did not do those films for my audience. He said it was for my own gratification. That really shocked me when I was listening to his descriptions about Close Encounters, because I love that movie. He said, I today would never have done a film where it showed a man like Roy Neary abandoning his wife, abandoning his children to go off with these aliens. Plus, he said, I would never show a dysfunctional family. What he's really saying is, because of radical feminism, he would never be able to do it, because women would not ever endorse such an idea that a man was the main character of a film anymore. He would never say that. He would not do that now, because he knows that would destroy any chance he would have to make other films. You know, I'm not trying to imply that what I do for myself is just for me. I hope other people enjoy it. But it isn't for me to do a video in the hopes that other people are going to either, you know, plaster me with, you know, gratifications, gratuity, you know, grand delusions of grandeur or whatever. I do it because I hope people enjoy it, not that I gain some overview perception that I'm great or whatever, like so many other people. Adventures with Christian, that's what he looks at himself, as far as how much money are people going to give him as a donation, how many subscribers is he going to gain because of what he does on his videos. If people subscribe, I'm grateful for every subscriber I have. But if I don't say things that they agree with, I feel like that's totally your right to choose not to visit or to watch my videos, because I'm doing it for the people who do appreciate what I do. I'm not doing these videos to hope other people might kind of like do a viral hit where everybody else watches it, you know, or they share it with other people. They do, it's great, but it's not the intention of why I do my videos. There's only one little boy I do my videos for, and that's Omron Dagnish, because I love him. I care about that little boy. I care about his family. Every day I pray for them, because I do pray for them. I pray for their safety in Aleppo. I pray for his people, because they've suffered so much. And society forgets so fast about the suffering of children around the world. They might see it for one day, and then the next day they forget about it. And that's one thing I don't want people forgetting about, what happened to the children in Aleppo. Those children went through things they should never have to go through. And there's a lot of people on Twitter and Facebook who feel the same way as I do. And that's why whenever I can, I try to share any new things that I get from Omran's father, Abu Ali. And a lot of people over the past year have said, oh, you should cut that out and stop doing it. And I'm like, it doesn't stop children who suffer. It doesn't stop just because people are telling me not to talk about it anymore. If you don't keep people's minds aware of what's happening around us, they will forget. And then it'll just keep going on and on and on. So I'm hoping through my videos that they'll constantly be seeing this repetitive statement that children still are hurting. They're still being brutalized all over the world. And it isn't from just child abuse. It's more from the wars that have no differential of victims, innocent bystanders. But children should never be singled out or targeted in wars. They shouldn't be shot down by rebel forces or by crazies like Assad or whatever. They should be trying to protect those children and keeping them where they can be protected and saved. And that's the point of why I continually try to share about Omran. He's the first child in the world, I think, who ever showed the horrors of what war can do to families, what it can do to children specifically. And, you know, I still feel to this day that it's the most important key thing in world politics, in humanity's understanding that life is precious, life is important, and that only doesn't just talk about children. I'm talking about unborn children who have no voice. We all should remember those who are suffering, wherever they are, under whatever circumstance. If we don't care about those children, very likely in the next 10 years, there probably may not even be any more births in the world, because Obama and the socialists are already trying to phase out the white race. They're trying to subjugate all other races except for Muslims. The Latinos are coming in here in droves because the intention is to totally eradicate what culture has existed in America for more than 150 years. They want the Latinos to basically take over as the majority in this country. I think that's why you see the Democrats just bending over backwards to do these things, because you have the key people who are the communist, socialist Democrats: Pelosi, Schumer, Warren, the other people, I can't remember their names, but these individuals are literally at or above retirement age. They're already in their 70s. So what they're doing is trying to say, this will be our lasting legacy, that we pushed for the destruction and the elimination of whites, the destruction of our culture as it was, to destroy everything that made America what it was. And that's why you see Nancy Pelosi, and you see Schumer, and you see Warren, and you see Flake, and you see all these other people who have been standing with the Democrats all these years, especially John McCain. They all want the destruction of what America is: a free nation, a country that used free enterprise and capitalism to control and to promote itself, to make what it was, a global economy system of free enterprise. And that's why Nancy Pelosi, that's why Stacey Abrams and all these other communists and socialists, they're wanting to destroy all of that. And they want us to be subjugated to a global new world order that Obama started. And I know I totally got off subject about what I was trying to say in this video about animation, but When you talk about these things, you cannot just keep your mind closed to every subject. You have to share as that opportunity comes up. And that's what I do in my videos now. Some people find that vulgar, or they find it distasteful, and I'm sorry. But you know what? Until the day that I can no longer speak and say anything on YouTube, I'm going to say what is happening in this country today. I'm not going to play dumb like so many people who are smoking marijuana right now and thinking it doesn't matter what happens to America, because as long as you have that vape and you're inhaling either marijuana or heroin, you're happy. Ladies and gentlemen, sooner or later, all of it's going to end, especially your freedom. And then the government's going to take it all away from you and say, you cannot have food in your house. You have no rights to a firearm to protect yourself. You have nothing. And that is what socialism's entire initiative is about. Destroy freedom. Destroy liberty. Destroy individuality. And that means they control here in your mind, they control everything else about you. And that is what Glenn Beck is standing up for. That's what Rush Limbaugh is speaking out about. And that's what I speak out about. Because I see what's happening. I saw it when Obama became president, and I was just totally flabbergasted how what he has done to this country, and how people so quickly now are wanting to complete it, what he started. It's insane how society pretends that it's not happening. They want to say to themselves, you're crazy, you're a conspirator, you don't know what you're talking about. I say, you'll wake up one day and you'll realize it's too late to fight, because it's all over. Your rights are ended. Everything you knew from the day you were born is gone. And now they're destroying human life even after it's born. That is not only inhumane. We've now gone to a level below even Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler killed at least 100 to 200 million Jewish people, civilians, innocent people. He killed them outright. And you think, is Obama any different? He hasn't literally killed people yet, but that is the intention of socialism. Control, subvert, eliminate. And Adolf Hitler's whole plan of National Socialism in Germany was to do just that. You didn't accept his philosophies, he took you out and he shot you in the streets. And people forget it because they don't want to hear what is reality and what is happening in this country today. That is reality, folks. That is what's going on in this country. You can tune me out all you want. You can do everything and anything you want to do, but you cannot escape reality. You cannot escape history. Old phrase, I see it all the time. If history is to repeat itself, it's because people don't care. They don't want to care. And idiocy is what causes it to repeat itself, because they don't learn from past mistakes. And that is an epitaph to America. We didn't listen, we didn't learn, and now we are faced with the same thing we were facing in 1939, 1940, 1944, up until the time that we finally defeated Germany and all of the other nations like Japan, Italy. People were like, we don't need to get involved in the war, and then the Japanese attacked us on December 7th, 1941. We need a real wake-up call, something like Japan, what they did to us at Pearl Harbor again. But I think there's too many lames, people who are just indifferent to it all. They wouldn't care what happened to this country. They just get right back in bed and just totally go back to sleep again. And that's why Obama has been able to get away with all this stuff. He's never been indicted for anything he did. People still idolize him. They still worship him. They still adore him. They'll kiss his butt every time he speaks out or says anything. And that is just, that's idiocy. It's complacency. You want somebody like Obama who said you can't do it without the government. You can't be an individual unless the government tells you who you'll be or what you will be. And that's why suicide is so high among teens, because they don't understand what they are anymore. They're pushing all these other perverted lifestyles like homosexuality. They're pushing transgender, bisexuals. You know, your mind is still learning. Your mind is still developing when you're young. If you're throwing this stuff in your face day after day like they do in school and everywhere else the kid goes, they'll lose it. They have lost it. And that's why you have all these things happening in society. Kids shooting each other. Kids shooting parents. Shooting strangers on the streets. Perversion has an origin to it, and that was Barack Obama, because he made it all legal. Then he said, we don't need guns. He said, if we take your gun away, nobody's going to be able to shoot you. That ain't true. Russia, when it went out as a nation, they reconstituted themselves because of Putin. But there was a thing called black market that existed after the fall of the Soviet Union. People were still able to buy guns. People were still able to buy ammunition. They were still able to buy food and everything else. Why? Because there'll always be a need for these things. So no matter how hard the communists do force society to accept, there'll still be little individual rebellious factions within the culture who will fight against it. There's enough of us out there who are fighting right now. And if we don't get hold of this country and the communist socialists who are trying to take it over, and we don't take back our nation, then nobody will be to blame but yourself, because you didn't take a stand and you didn't stand against what Barack Obama started and all of his legions, the swamp. If you don't stand for President Trump, you're standing for a communist regime to control and to totally take over this nation and totally make it a totalitarianism regime, a fascist regime. That's what America is today. And if you don't fight against it, folks, I'm sorry, but that's the end of us. That's the end of the United States of America. That is the beginning of the United Socialist States of America. It's already pretty much here, but people don't get it anymore because they don't want to get it anymore. And that's sad. But the only hope we have is the fact that Jesus Christ will return one day. He's already said he will return. People have prophesied that there will be a limited nuclear exchange on this planet before Jesus returns. That means it's inevitable there will be nuclear war. And when that happens, it's not going to last very long, because they've already said it. Jesus will return very soon thereafter. But it has to happen first before he can return. Now, will the rapture happen before a nuclear war takes place? I don't know the answer to that. I don't think anybody knows the answer to that. All I can pray for is that it does happen. That's the only hope there is for the church. That's God's bride. That's Jesus' bride, the church. Yes, it's disintegrating, it's disappearing because of Satan, because of the Democrats. They want to abolish religion, except for Muslims. Islam is the only culture and the only religion that Obama endorses. And that means that's the only religion he's going to actually allow when he takes total control over the world. When he becomes the global dictator of this nation and the entire United Nations, he's going to make it a one-world religion. And that's going to be what it primarily is all over Europe and most of the other parts of the world, Islam. That is going to be Obama's world religion. And it's very close to already having happened. They're saying by 2026, all of Europe will be Islamic. There will be no Christians or any other culture left in the rest of the hemisphere itself, except for the United States and maybe Canada. And he's already pushing us to saying, you got to abandon that sort of philosophy about Christianity. It's not going to work under my regime. It's not going to work under what I intend it to be in this country. And that's going to be his one world religion, Islam. It's going to be him being worshipped. Don't be surprised if Obama goes on national television, maybe tomorrow, maybe next year, and he says, I hereby announce that I am the 12th Mahdi of the Islamic Brotherhood. I am the one they've been waiting for. He'll make an announcement to the United Nations. He'll say, I am your Messiah. You believed it. Barbara Walters said it during the 8 years he was president. Now I'm just confirming it. I'm going front and center to the world on national television, world television. I'm telling you all, that's who I am. That's what's going to happen. Obama is going to come forward and he's going to say that. When he says that, folks, that's the end game. For 7 years, there will be tribulation like nothing the world's ever seen, even prior to Adolf Hitler, even before Napoleon, before anybody. This guy is going to make this earth a lake of fire in our present plane of existence. And all of that just is reiterated in the Bible. The Bible's already said that. So, you know, in any opportunity I have, I will share more about how I feel about what Obama is in any video I do, because I think it's very important that people realize, what is all of this going to be? What is the end game? What is the end result of socialism? World domination. That's what communism was. That's what Obama is pushing, as well as the Democrats. World domination. Control, subversion. Go to my other channel, GNN. Go to the other videos I've done about the Global News Network. These are videos I've done in the last 2 years that have to do with this very subject. And just now people are starting to realize what I've said all these years ago about what Obama was going to do to this country. And then you can say, boy, why weren't we listening? Because you didn't want to. Thank you.
I made this. Yeah, لأنني ميكن بيحب وصلة بيحب وصلة لأنك بيحب
His name is Omran Daknesh, just 5 years old, and his feet barely hung over the edge of a seat in an ambulance. Dazed, he didn't cry as he wiped away blood and the dust from a building that collapsed around him in an airstrike. His silence somehow reminded the world today of its silence in the face of the atrocities in Aleppo. Omran was pulled out alive Wednesday. 5 other children died when the building they were in was hit during the relentless Syrian-Russian offensive on rebel-held areas in Aleppo. The image of Omran's face spread like wildfire on the internet. One tweet called him the real representative of the Syrian people.
Stop killing Syrian innocent people, civilian. Our children need to live in peace.
The doctor who treated Omran said today there were many more severe cases no one is paying attention to.
We need to protect our hospital, our doctors, our medical workers from airstrike.
Omran is recovering. His family now wants to escape. The same choice another boy's family made a year ago, Aylan Kurdi, whose body washed up on a beach. He too was a symbol of Syria's youngest victims. Now there's a new one. Tomorrow there may be another. Richard Engel, NBC News.
They've reported from around the world, challenged the powerful, and they bring all of this to every story that breaks.
We've got breaking news, and it's good news.
And touches your heart.
How do you even say thank you? Thank you is not big enough.
I made this.
The images shocked the world. Relentless bombings. Stunned survivors.
Apa?